Hey everybody, Leah Klett here with the Christian Post, and I'm so excited because today my guest is Josh Bolin. He is the director of The Thorn, a live stage production following Jesus's life, death, and resurrection. It's now hitting the big screen just in time for Easter. Well, Josh, it's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you, Leah.
I have to say, I really enjoyed The Thorn. It was so cool to watch this incredible production and just the amount of artistry and work that must have gone into creating this project.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been doing this production for actually a little over 20 years. It began as a little small production and has grown a lot over the last 20 years. But we're so we're honored to have some really amazing performers. We've got dancers from the Joffrey Ballet School in New York. We've got former Broadway stars. We've got U.S. Olympic gymnastic quality gymnast. We've got world champion martial artists. So the cast and crew and the actors and singers, performers really are amazing. So they make doing this performance a real joy.
It truly is a work of art. And so for our readers who are like, what is the Thorn? If you were to summarize this, what would you say?
You know, people have described the Thorn as kind of like the Passion of the Christ meets Cirque du Soleil. Now, I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but that's pretty close. It's not a musical, so Peter doesn't sing from the garden. There's no like Jewish line dancing in the production. It's more like watching a Cirque experience. So, and then the entire story is tied together with a narrator. So there's really only one speaking part, and that's the narrator who tells the story. And then we have these scenes that we watch in between the narration. Now, for the filmed version of The Thorn, normally in the live show, the narrator sort of breaks the fourth wall and addresses the audience and interacts with them and all that. But for the film version, we felt like it wasn't going to work that way, and so we actually filmed a standalone mini story that the Thorn is wrapped around, kind of like the movie Princess Bride, where you have the old man and the little boy. It's like that. So we have an old John the Beloved and a 12-year-old slave boy, Asher. And John the Beloved is telling the slave boy the story of Jesus. And then we cut to the filmed live performance scenes as kind of John's memories and his vision and that kind of thing.
What's incredible. I think it is just so cleverly done. What does now in the beginning you say this is 25 years in the making. This is your baby. This is a pet project for you. What does it mean to see this going from the stage to the big screen? What has that experience been like?
Well, it's a learning experience, Leah, for sure. I mean, I think I've got my PhD in filmmaking from the pre-production to the production to the post-production. I had no idea what goes into this. So huge respect for filmmakers and what it takes to do that. We've been doing live stage and on a big scale for a lot of years. And so I thought I could figure out what that was like to do film, but it's a whole new animal for us. So it was a huge challenge, but boy, is it rewarding to see the work of 20 plus years come together in a film project that now can be expanded. So our challenge has always been we were limited to how many cities we could tour to with our team. And we've been all over the US. 1 million people have seen it live over the last 25 years, but that's mostly just in the United States. So we didn't have a way, and we've never been to the Northeast. We've never been to the upper Midwest. And so this is a way for people across the country that have never been to a Thorn live performance to experience it. And it's a way for the story to travel across the world. We're talking to some companies in Africa and Latin America about bringing the Thorn film to that part of the world. So that's really exciting to think of the story of God being told in this really imaginative and different way using the performing arts. And for people across the world to be able to experience that's humbling, and it's something that really only God could do. I would never have seen this coming even 2 or 3 years ago, and for sure not 20 years ago.
Well, and I love sort of the origin of the story. You were a youth pastor.
So
Talk about why you initially made
yeah,
this.
it's really. I wish it had a really well, it's dramatic, but it's not that. Well, I'll just tell you the story. So it was on a Wednesday night. I started out as a volunteer youth pastor. I'm not a seminarian, not a theologian or anything like that. I wasn't a great speaker. So instead of preaching on Wednesday night to these kids, I would do these like illustrated sermons. This is back in the late 90s. So we would do like live music and drama and pyrotechnics. And I figured if I was bored of me speaking, then these high school and college students were bored of me speaking. And so my parents were both professional stage actors. So I thought, you know what, we'll use the dramatic arts as a way to communicate the gospel. And so there was one Wednesday night after a youth meeting, I'm sitting on the edge of the stage, and this 16-year-old girl is sitting next to me, and she's bawling. and she holds out her arms, and I could see where she'd been cutting up and down her arms. And
Mm.
so I turned to her and I said, you don't have to do that because Jesus did that for you. So then I thought, next Wednesday night, we're going to do an illustrated sermon. That was the beginning, really just a skit, essentially. And we're going to communicate two things. Number one is the price that Jesus paid for high school and college kids. And so I didn't want it to be gratuitous, but I wanted it to be visceral and real. I wanted them to know that whatever pain they're going through, whatever difficult season of life they're going through, whether it's family or health or friends or mental, I wanted them to know that Jesus understands because he's been here and he took the stripes for them. And then number two, I wanted them to understand there's what I think a spiritual battle for their choices, their identity, and their calling. And so the next Wednesday night, we did the very first Thorn performance. And the reality is, I picked the name The Thorn literally as I'm walking onto the platform, or I would have picked maybe a better name, but it's just stuck now for 20 years. So we did that first performance, and Leah was not that great. The music wasn't great. The makeup wasn't great. The singing was okay. They wouldn't let us move the grand piano, so Jesus rose from under the grand piano. We didn't have any lighting. We had 4 people in the corners of the room turning up lights. But God had his thumbprint on that very first Thorn performance, and hundreds of high school and college kids made decisions for Jesus. And then the next Easter, they asked us to do the Thorn for the church. And so with the first Thorn performance, we actually did on Wednesday night, Halloween night in 1997. So then the next Easter, we did it for the church, and we improved it. We changed some things. My wife and I had been to Las Vegas and seen Cirque du Soleil. And I remember thinking, if they can move me this much. I remember watching the Cirque show O, which is at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. It's this water show, and it's got beautiful makeup and costumes and stagecraft, but it's not redemptive.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being so deeply moved. And this is a story that wasn't redemptive. I thought to myself, how much more could we tell the story of God? And maybe we can use some of these same kind of things. So that we began to integrate a lot of these other kinds of performing arts into the story. So that first Easter, we did the Thorn, and true story, there was almost a quarter mile of cars that couldn't get into the parking lot. They closed the gates to the parking lot. Cars were parking on the field, and people were crawling under the barbed wire fence to get into church to watch this production. And then we did it every year at that church for about 10 years, and it became an annual thing. And we had casts as big as like 600. We build these massive sets, and we would have these huge casts. And then about 2011, we decided that we needed to scale this. We were getting calls from around the country of churches that wanted us to bring the Thorn to the church. So we formed a touring division kind of the Thorn, or a touring model, and we began to tour with performers. And then now we're even further along in that. And this year we're going to all performing arts centers and arenas. We've got a cast and crew of about 50 world-class performers. So that's kind of the history of the live show. I can tell you about the movie too, if you want to talk.
So tell me all about it.
So 2020, of course, we were launching our Thorn tour, and we had 2 cities in California, Sacramento, Bakersfield. We did those 2 cities, came to Colorado. We set everything up. It was the Friday of our premiere in Colorado, and we got the call from the governor that we couldn't meet. And this is, of course, during COVID, or the very, very beginning of COVID. So we shut down the rest of the tour. We went into 2021, and the Thorn was totally dark. We didn't tour at all. I remember feeling like maybe it's over. Maybe this season of my wife and I carrying the story in this way with these amazing performers and production people and artists, and maybe that season's over and it's time for the next thing. And then I saw that Dallas Jenkins had done The Chosen in movie theaters for his Christmas special. This is 2021. And I thought to myself, I wonder if the Thorn could be fathomable, like Fathom event. We bring it to movie theaters. So we talked to Fathom, and Fathom said, yeah, we think it would be a great Fathom event. In fact, Katie Sawyer over at Fathom said, John, we've been trying to get a hold of you for several years to bring the Thorn to Fathom, because they began as kind of a way to broadcast the performing arts across the country, right? So if you wanted to watch the Metropolitan Ballet or the New York Opera or Broadway, then, and you're in Middle America, you could watch it on these movie screens sometimes during the week. And so that they began that way. And then over the past 5 or 10 years, they've really built this inspirational Christian vertical of The Chosen and Life Mark and Case for Heaven, et cetera. And so we thought, well, the Thorn could be a really good fit on both of those, because we are performing arts. We're also a movie. We're also obviously inspirational in Christian content. So we filmed the show in 2022. and we're set up for a release on March 6th and 7th with Fathom, and so excited about what that's going to look like. God has really opened the doors for this film. It's beautiful. The way the film was captured is, so it's the entire show, and then it's wrapped in the story that I told you about between John the Beloved and this little boy Asher. But we thought the Thorn was over, and not only is it not over, but we're seeing God open doors that we never dreamed he would open. And we've made a big shift from just local churches to performing arts centers. We really feel like God's calling us to tell this story in the public square. And so we would love to do for the story of Jesus in performing arts centers what Dallas is doing so amazingly on television with The Chosen. That's kind of our heart and passion, is let's tell the story of God at a high level. I remember, Leah, walking into this performing arts center a few months ago. We walked back to the manager's office, and we passed these posters of like Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, and Hamilton. And it's like my spirit just kind of leapt. And I thought, now that's where the story of God deserves to be told. And right now, there's the story of Jesus is pretty absent in our metropolitan performing arts centers, but not anymore. And so the Thorn is going to go into those performing arts centers and proclaim who Jesus is and tell the story of God in a way that's beautiful and visceral and meaningful, and I think reach a whole segment of our population that may never darken the doors of a church, but would walk into a performing arts center. And so we're excited this year. The film is going to be released here in America and then potentially around the world, and the Thorn will expand to these brand new venues. So it's an exciting year for us for sure.
That's fantastic. Well, this is a message that transcends time. I mean, you've been telling it since the 90s. What do you think accounts for this incredible interest in stories like in The Passion, The Chosen, and now The Thorn? Why are people just so thirsty for this?
Well, I think it's God, first of all. Like he's the architect of this, and Dallas would say the same thing. He and I have worked on a couple of projects in the past, and we know that God, when he comes in, when he decides to make something work, it doesn't matter. There's nothing we can do to stop it, and there's nothing we can do to make it happen. And so when he comes into the equation, it's up to him to do his work. We just have to be faithful with what we have, right? But I do think for a lot of years, Christians, I think if you look way back in time, Leah, during the Renaissance, Christians led the way in the arts, from architecture to fine art to music, across the illuminated manuscripts. Like Christians were doing that. And then somewhere along the way, we sort of like gave that mantle over. We gave that the leading the arts over to just secular people. And so I think there's an opportunity for us as the body of Christ to not just tell stories, but to tell great stories and to do them at a high level. And so I think that's what people are hungry for and excited about. And Mel Gibson really did that, obviously, with Passion of the Christ. His filmmaking ability and the way that he did that as an artist, and then what Dallas has done with The Chosen is not just another Christian product, but it's taking the story of Jesus and not just making it human, but doing it with incredible excellence and great storytelling that moves you. And so hopefully the Thorn does the same thing on the stage, and on the stage/film, on the filmed version, where people can experience the story of God. And the thing we hear when people walk away from the Thorn is they say, that's not what I expected. Yeah. And because we created it for high school and college students, that's still the category of people that maybe like it the most. And I'm always aiming at the 20-something. Like if we can make the story of God engaging, where a 20-something will lean in and say, this isn't cheesy, and this is really interesting and exciting, and something I wouldn't be embarrassed to invite my friends to, that's a win for us. And so I think that the body of Christ at large are looking for artists that will tell stories, and then tell really good stories, well done, with good artistry, good craftsmanship, and be committed to excellence.
Josh, what are some reactions you've heard over the years to the Thorn? I know you said that you've seen so many people come to Christ, but share some of your favorite responses you've received.
Oh, geez. I mean, it's all over the map. One of the biggest things, like I said earlier, that we hear over and over again is, that's not what I expected in church. So there's this moment during the live show where we may or may not do this year. We're not sure yet, but in the past, there's been this moment where after the crucifixion, there's this moment of kind of like it's quiet before the resurrection, and we have these two huge metal crosses that we put up in the auditoriums or the arenas where we are, and we give people a moment to sort of like have a response time. And we have these tables set out, and these white magnets that are on the tables. and we'll have a worship moment. So Jesus has been crucified. We know he's going to rise soon, but it's like this interim time. And then we say, if you want to go to the cross and write something on that magnet and put it on the cross. I'm a youth pastor, used to be a youth pastor, and so it's kind of in my blood, this kind of like retreat thing. So we did it at a big scale. And I'm telling you, Leah, the things you would see on these crosses and what God did at these crosses was just amazing. There was one time in Denver, we were at the Magnus Arena, and one of the Denver Bronco running backs ran to the cross, just about knocked it over. He's bawling, and just the encounter with the Lord that happened there at the cross is powerful. Numerous times we've seen these magnets on the cross that said, I was going to commit suicide tonight, but now I'm not.
Wow.
We've seen God deliver people from depression, from addiction. We've seen healing happen. We've seen certainly emotional healing, physical healing, marriages coming together again, people just encountering God in a way they haven't before. And I think it's both these pieces of like the reality of Jesus' sacrifice, but then also the reality of what we think is a supernatural battle for our choices in our life. And I think when people realize, hey, God has a plan for your life, the enemy wants to come and steal, kill, and destroy. But God comes to bring life. And so when people realize that, they maybe contend for their lives differently after experiencing something like the Thorn. So, I mean, those are just tip of the iceberg experiences, but we can show you the audience reactions of like, wow, I didn't expect that. I had one of my actors, his niece came, actually the guy that played Jesus, a British actor who's in the film, he played the part of Jesus, and his niece came to the production, not a believer at all, and came kind of kicking and screaming. And as soon as the production began, her eyes were just wide open and jaw dropped and leaning in. This opening scene is this fantastic heaven scene, the creation of the world, and it's really amazing. And then by the end of it, she's just bawling, and she goes and tells her uncle, like, this is not what I expected. I wasn't ready for this. And so I just think God meets people where they are, and it's fun to watch that happen. And it's like this roller coaster, because you laugh, the narrator makes you laugh, and these scenes make you, awestruck with just this breathtaking beauty and the performing arts quality. And then of course the passion moments themselves are deeply moving and hard sometimes to watch. In fact, we've had to pull it back quite a bit for the film version. The live version is even more intense than the film version, but we want to make it as family friendly as we can for the film version.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so excited for you guys, and thank you for putting out this kind of incredible content. It's always so encouraging to see that.
Thank you. My wife and I we have 5 teenagers now, and they've all kind of gone through the Thorn in one way or another. And so seeing them embrace Jesus, excited about the cross, excited about their faith, that makes all the difference. And it's a big part of what drives us to keep doing what we do, because of what we hear and when we see, especially young people, but people of all ages that experience this story and say, okay, I've gone back to the cross for the first time, or the first time in a long time. And that's worth everything to us.